The Iron Game Chalk Talk podcast is brought to you by the following sponsors: EliteForm.com, IgnitionAPG.com, PlayUSA at PLAEUSA.com, and Sorinex Exercise Equipment at Sorinex.com. And now, the Iron Game Chalk Talk podcast. Welcome to Iron Game Chalk Talk with your host, Ron McKeefery.
Every time our athletes walk into this weight room, they're going to be pushed to the max.
Let's go! Everything you got!
On this podcast, hear Coach McKeefery's straight talk about training, featuring the top strength and conditioning professionals from around the world. And now, here's your host, Ron McKeefery.
Hey guys, welcome back to Iron Game Chalk Talk. I'm your host, Ron McKeefery, and this is episode number 129. Iron Game Chalk Talk is a weekly podcast where I bring you experts in the field that talk shop. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to us on iTunes or YouTube, or join the mailing list at ronmckeefery.com to stay up to date with the latest guests and anything else that I have going on. Super excited to have Yosef Johnson with us. Yosef is the owner of Ultimate Athlete Concepts. He's been the guy that's been instrumental in getting the works of Dr. Verkhoshansky and Bondarchuk and Yessis and some of the great sports scientists from around the world and getting their works in consumable format. And so we bring him on. We talk about those guys, his relationships, and how he's able to form those relationships with some of the greats. We talk about why we should even worry about some of their research that may be 20, 30 years old and how it's still relevant today, and tons more. And so I know you're going to get a ton out of this. Before we do, I want to make sure we recognize our sponsor for this episode, Sorinex. As you guys know, I am a huge fan of Bert Soren and Pops and everybody at the Sorinex family, the Bosco Brotherhood, and just a fantastic, phenomenal people, lifters, people that understand what it means to have great equipment and the training and the work and the dedication and everything that goes into creating a strength and conditioning program. But one of the things that I love most about them is their innovation. They are constantly pushing the envelope. Sometimes to where they're not, the market isn't quite ready for them. Sometimes where they're onto something so big like the center mass bells here that people are trying to knock them off already, and that's been constant in their evolution. And if you talk to them about it, you know what, their response is just hey, what, everybody is following us, then we're doing the right things, and always taking the high road. But I can't say enough about them as people. But if you have not checked out the center mass bells, get you a center mass bell as quickly as you can. Played around with it quite a bit at the conferences. Got an opportunity to mess around with it at Summer Strong, and tell you what, it's a game changer in a lot of ways. And so we cannot wait till we get ours up here. But it's definitely an element, a tool that's unique and distinctive, and brings a lot of options to your program. And so check them out, Sorinex Center Mass Bells, Sorinex.com. Follow them on Facebook and Twitter. They're always putting out great stuff. But can't say enough about them. Want to get to this episode with Yosef. Sit back and enjoy, and we'll see you on the other side. All right, guys, super excited to have Yosef Johnson with us. Yosef is the owner of Ultimate Athlete Concepts, and I just realized, and I did not know this, that he's a fellow Michiganer. And so we were going to definitely hook up, but I followed him from afar. You guys are in for a treat today, man, and I appreciate you coming on the show, brother.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be on.
Let's kind of go into your story a little bit, because it's a little bit different than the average, strength coach or person that's on the show. Talk a little bit about how you got kind of into this industry, and then kind of what led you to Ultimate Athlete Concepts.
Yeah, so I grew up in Muskegon, Michigan. A couple hours from where you guys are at in Ypsilanti, and wanted to play sports. Not very good. I was average, maybe a little below average, really. And as you know, the athletes here in Muskegon are really good. The football program is always extremely competitive. And I played basketball, though. And so went out for the basketball team every year, never made it. And finally, I got to my senior year, and the coach was like, I'm getting tired of seeing you. So he puts me on the team, right? He's like, I can't even believe you won't go away. And so I made the team my senior year. Still didn't play, obviously, but I'm 12th man, whatever. But it just frustrated me to no end that a lot of other guys were good athletes, and I was below average as an athlete. And I'm this eternal optimist. I always think there's some way of figuring things out and make that difference up, right? And it just bugged me to death. And so after high school, went to college. I kind of kept up on it, and it just wouldn't leave me alone. So I wanted to go back and play. I was at a small school in Indiana. It was at an Indiana University, actually outpost, but they have their own separate athletic program. Wanted to play basketball for them. And so I started reading books, looking for ideas on how to improve athletic ability. So I'm looking in the back of Muscle and Fitness magazine. They got advertisements for a bunch of different books, right? So one of the books happened to be Secret of Soviet Sports Fitness and Training, written by Dr. Michael Yessis. I recognized the back cover had a picture of him and Todd Marinovich on it. So I'm like, oh, okay. Now I remember the Todd Marinovich story. He's about a year older than me, just about the same age. And he was phenomenal. If you remember back then, this was like unheard of. A high school athlete actually getting national attention was unheard of. He's on the cover of Sports Illustrated, broke all the quarterback records in the country. And theoretically, from what I'd understood, he wasn't born phenomenal.
Right.
So I'm like, well, maybe this is my guy, right? So I read all the books, and being the way that the optimist, I start looking for him. I call down to Cal Fullerton, where he had been a professor. He'd already retired, and the lady was nice enough to give me a forwarding phone number. So I called him in Escondido, and he doesn't know who I am. Who's this guy calling me?
Guy, right?
And I was bugging the crap out of him. So I flew down there about 2 or 3 months later. We met, hit it off pretty good. My athletic career never really got legs because the other thing that was actually going on, I had an immune system disorder that really did not allow me to endure training properly. And also a herniated disc at L5S1, which had given me quite a few fits too. So, I worked with him for a couple of years in the limited way that I could, and I got really good improvement, even though, I got this back problem, I got this immune system problem, so I'm constantly fatigued was the main side effect of my immune system problem. So constantly fatigued, and as you know, if you're tired and you're trying to train, the results are going to be muted greatly.
No doubt.
But I was still getting good results. So I was like, wow. So what ended up happening was I started to, other people that would be around, hey, how do you do this, improving training and stuff like that? And I'm like, I never thought it. I had no intent. I was done, and then I was just going to go on. I was an econ major. I was going to go in business, and that was it. And then, him and I stayed together, did some work together. I helped him out, and he helped me out a little bit with the training. So our relationship just kept evolving from there. And so to be honest with you, the first 7 years probably that him and I were together, I didn't know anybody in the United States that was working in this field. I didn't ever thought about it because it was a personal interest of mine, not like It was like a hobby, So over the course of time, we did work together, and then somewhere out of the blue, Yuri Veroshansky, who obviously is probably the greatest mind in sports science, especially on the research side, asked if Dr. Yessis would be interested in translating a book he had written. And Doc's like, no, he's been doing this forever. He's like, no, I've done that for 30 years. And so Doc's like, I said, well, why don't we check and see if anybody would be interested? Just out of fun, because Yuri asked me too. And so I posted on the super training group. I got a bunch of real positive feedback. People were like, yeah, I definitely would buy it.
Right.
And it was actually enough people said they would buy it that help us cover our cost. And I'm like, okay, let's give it a shot. So we did, and it worked. And so that was the birth of that idea of publishing, came from there. And then the coaching aspect, I had a friend whose son was playing at Bradley University down there in Illinois, and he came to us, I think it was in 2000, and he got cut from a minor league team because he was too slow. We worked with him for 6 months. He went back. He was faster than everybody. And what they, because they did a couple of tests, right? And they said, actually, they think he's faster than everybody in the whole league. So I'm like, wow, maybe we're on to something. Because here's a healthy guy who didn't have any other problems, and he got a phenomenal result in six months. And I was like, wow, maybe we're on to something here, right? And it was this speaks to how much the difference was. He went to the next year when he went to their free agent camp, he went to the one you have to pay for. He wasn't invited.
Right.
So those are fundraisers, right?
Yeah.
Those guys aren't ever making the team.
No doubt.
So he makes the team, but not only that, it spurs the beat. The beat writer was at this free agent paid camp, which I don't even know why he went. And he calls me about a week later. He said, Mr. Johnson, he said, I don't know what you did. He said, I've never seen anything like that in my life. He said, I've been covering the Pistons and the Hoops for 20 years. He said, I've never seen anything like that. Tell me what you did. Mm-hmm. And so we ended up writing a story about it. And I thought, wow, maybe we're on to something.
Right.
And that's how that evolved. So, kids would, and I never intended to work with high school kids because I thought it would be a pain. And a couple of years later, this one kid called me and would not stop calling. He just would not leave me alone. I'm like, all right, I'll do it. If you'll shut up, I'll do it. And it turned out I liked it.
Right.
And so I've enjoyed that. And so what's ended up happening is because of the publishing, I also met a lot of strength and conditioning coaches at the collegiate and pro level. And I've been interacting with them a lot. We've been very heavily involved in the Central Virginia seminar that Jay DeMayo does down there.
Fantastic job, yeah.
He does a real, I really appreciate what he does because the guy, was willing to go outside the box a little bit with authors and people that everybody didn't really know as well,
Right.
Maybe not as popular. And, it took some courage to do that, and he did, and he does a great job. So that's kind of been, that evolved out of that. And then what ended up happening, now I'm the old guy now. I used to be in the younger guy, right? When I'm with my authors, I'm the
that
kid,
suck?
right? No, man. I just realized it too. It clicked with me. I'm like, you're the old guy now.
I know. I'm going through that myself.
Just when I'm with Dr. Yessis and Dr. Bondarchuk or any of that group, I'm the kid in the group. I'm the dumbest and the youngest.
Right.
Now I'm the oldest and still maybe the dumbest, but I got more experience than the other guys.
Absolutely.
So these guys that are in their 20s and 30s or early 30s calling me, and I just basically started helping them with my experience. I said, here's what we've done. I'm not a scientist. I didn't go to school for this. I don't have a degree, so I don't pretend to have some vast knowledge. But what I do have is experience, and I've been lucky, really beyond lucky, really blessed. I'm around the smartest people in the world. What are the odds of you getting into a field and you getting to be that close contact with the smartest people in the world? It's 1 in a billion, right?
Absolutely.
So I'm extremely fortunate in that way that if I have a question, I can call the expert in the world on it. That's just, it blows my mind when I think about it. How did that even happen? So that's kind of how this has evolved. That's how the publishing got started. People actually, Dr. Vladimir Zatsiorsky actually approached me about doing Dr. Isurin's books. I didn't even know who Isurin was, and I knew a lot of the Russian stuff. I didn't know who he was. It turned out to be great. And then Dr. Bondarchuk moved to Canada. We got together, and now it's evolving. We've added new authors and a lot more content, and so that's kind of how we got landed here today.
That's awesome. And there's some great nuggets in there that strength coaches can absolutely pull out. One, obviously, I think we can all relate to the athlete that maybe wasn't as gifted as the other athletes. That that's why we found an affinity and a love for what we do. The second thing is that what I really appreciate about what you shared was when you had a question, you didn't BS around. You decided to go right to the source. And you weren't concerned about your ego, and you weren't concerned about being perceived as dumb or whatever. You went and just asked questions, and what's funny about that is when you do that and you surround yourself with some of the best in the world, and it's the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hour rule, right? You become an expert, put 10,000 hours towards something. That's what you've done. You put 10,000 plus hours towards this. Yeah. That now you're widely considered as an expert, and I know you won't.
I've been trying to tell my wife and kids that, but they still are.
Yeah, mine don't do that either, but. The thing about it, that's such a valuable lesson for everybody listening to, whether or not you are in your 20th year coaching or your first year coaching, is asking questions and humbling yourself that you don't have all the answers, and reaching out to people that are far smarter. But the thing that I pulled out that I really want to get into and dive into is the global approach that you've kind of taken to this. I mean, obviously the Soviet sports, and then back, especially 20 plus years ago, it was a bigger deal than it is now in terms of kind of where the world was at that time. But you've reached out to some of these people. Explain to everybody that's listening, kind of like what's the when we pull on the Olympics every year, the United States is dominating in a lot of things, winning lots of gold medals. And so why should I care? What the Russians are doing, what the Chinese are doing. Why not dive deeper into what maybe the United States is doing? And I'm asking this from a standpoint of I totally agree with you. I mean, we need to have a global approach.
It's a good question.
We need to have a global approach to things, and there's people like and I think you'll get into it is. I mean, we're just now starting to get to a point where we're allocating the types of resources towards sports performance that Russia was doing 20 plus years ago or 30 plus years ago. But talk a little bit about why we should even really dive into some of that old literature.
Yeah. So that's a great question, and it's a very legitimate question. Why should we? We're really good already. We have a lot of Olympic success, and that's true. And why should we worry about what the Soviets were doing 30 years ago? Also, another great question, and I'll try to take it point by point. One is the reason why the United States has the success it does, and a lot of people don't realize this. We don't study athletes in the United States. There is no such thing.
Right.
So when you get your degree to be a strength and conditioning coach, it might be over in physiology, it might be kinesiology, exercise science. There's a couple of different iterations of that, right? But we don't study athletes, and people don't realize that. We don't. We don't study high level, especially not high level. We don't really even study lower level athletes. We study physiology as it's in and of itself, kinesiology in and of itself. We also study maybe stuff on general population.
Right.
Or a kid who plays intramural sports. We might throw him in a little study.
Sure.
But we've never studied like how do we get this guy who runs a 4.6 to run a 4.4? How do we do that?
That's a great point.
So this is what people don't realize. We don't study athletes. It's apples and oranges. When we say that the Soviets were far ahead of us, I used to say that. Now what I say is it's not a discussion because we don't study what they study. Mm-hmm. It's not even, there's no comparison because it's not the same thing. So that I think that's the first thing that people should know. Secondly, if we take the notion that if a certain country maybe is really good with a particular sport, that their science must be good. I'm going to beg to differ because I don't think Jamaica's got a leading cutting edge scientific department.
Right.
They got the fastest guys on planet Earth.
Right.
And it's not close. They're faster than everybody. I mean, Usain Bolt has just shattered everything. And how is it that you have 2 to 3 other guys who also are in the top 5 in the world?
Mm-hmm.
Speed. So genetics plays an overriding place here. And the reason I believe 2 of the reasons why the United States is successful. Number one, we have a big population. That's one of the reasons. The other one is we have this great cross of ethnicities.
Right.
We've got all these cross sections there, and so you got people who are genetically really big, some people who are genetically really fast, whatever the case may be, and so we can do a lot of different sports.
I agree with
that. And so that's the reason. What's interesting about the Soviets is that their population was much more homogeneous in terms of genetics, right? They were very similar, so they didn't have this great cross group that we have. So what people don't understand is they studied athletes, and not only did they study them. When you lived in the Soviet Union prior to the fall, there was no such thing as being in business or being this celebrated strength coach who sells a lot of videos or books. There's no such thing.
Right.
You either went into the military, or the space program, or sports. There's 3.
Yeah.
That mattered, right?
Right.
And if you wanted to live a life of any significance. So you had the things that are interesting is what we can have here in the United States is we can have guys who look like experts who really aren't. You couldn't do that over there because there's no marketing. There's no such thing as marketing, commercials, television, none of that. So you had to be the real deal or you didn't make it. So what was interesting is that once you decided where you were going to go, the government put billions, literally billions behind it. So I'll give you an example. At the University of Kiev, they had 700 scientists only studying how to make their athletes better.
Wow.
700 scientists, not students, scientists. And they went out and recruited the smartest people. They found that you were really good in math. They may come over and say, look, Ron, you're a really good student. What do you think about maybe getting over here into biomechanics? You really got a good mind for that. Or if you were an expert in physiology, if you had and they would recruit people for it.
Right.
And what are you going to do? You're going to tell them no?
Sure.
I mean, not that you were being forced to do it, but what other great options did you have?
Right.
It's limited. So what ended up happening is they were able to put a lot of really brilliant people into the scientific areas like Dr. Bereshansky and use his mind to help. And not only that, he was a former athlete and a former coach, right? So he's got all this experience and very bright, and they put the money behind it. That was a major part of their national budget, where like here in the United States, the amount of money that the USOC might get is none, right? Over there, it was in the billions.
Wow.
Billions, And at Moscow, at the university, there was more scientists. And here's what's interesting. They would have a soccer department, let's just say, and they had a guy who specialized in the physiology of soccer. That's what he did, right? You can't even relate to that, right?
Right.
And if you were an orthopedist, you had to have an MD and a PhD. You were an MD and a PhD in biomechanics so that you could actually predict injuries before they happen to prevent them. And Dr. Yessis related this story to me. He was standing there one day watching high jumpers. He was standing next to one of the orthopedists, and he said that guy's going to get an injury. And then he tells him what injury it's going to be. And Doc's like, what? Where'd you get that from? He said, the way he's jumping. He said, sure enough, 2 months later, the guy got an injury.
Wow.
He said he couldn't believe it. And Dr. Yessis did it 1997. I think Tiger Woods had just come on the scene. He said he's going to get a back injury. And I said, how do you know? He said, well, the way he swings, he started explaining to me. Sure enough, 6 months later, he had a back injury. I couldn't believe it. So they were just so much further ahead of us because they were pursuing it relentlessly. They put the money into it. And because of the propaganda, kind of motivation, they just were pursuing it with a vigor that we can't even relate to. And also, they were putting the smartest people, on the job. And I think that's the difference. And no one could debate. I mean, when they did go to the Olympics, they did win.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't like they were behind us. Their medal count, they beat us.
Right. Absolutely.
And they beat everybody. And they kicked the snot out of us a couple times. And then you look at somebody like a Dr. Bondarchuk who goes to 4 Olympics, and he's got every medalist. One coach, every medal. Not just one, not the gold, but he had all of them. And in 1976, he was one of the medalists.
Wow.
He was the bronze. He had the bronze, and his 2 students had the gold and the silver. You know what I mean? So, you gotta find some correlation there between their expertise and what was happening, right?
Sure.
So that's kind of that's why I think you have to look at it. And the other thing that a lot of people don't realize, because a lot of people out of hand will say, "Oh, well, they were using steroids," and my response is, "So was the rest of the world."
Yeah.
There's no difference. As a matter of fact, we have much better pharmacology than they had at the time. So they knew about stuff, but they couldn't make it. They didn't have the setup for it. So when American coaches would go over there, they would actually ask them where to find stuff. Dr. Yessis said he spent time with some of the coaches, and he said they'd say, "Hey, do you know how to find such and such?" And Doc's like, "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm a professor. I don't know anything about that." So that charge is really baseless because we probably were more sophisticated in the pharmacology department than they were at the time. So, were they taking them? Yes. Were we? Yes.
Yeah.
So it was a level playing field in that sense.
Well, yeah, that's the typical response, and it's an ignorant response. I mean, it's just uneducated in that you're right. I mean, there's examples of both athletes that were taking them, that had success, and the whole deal. But there's a lot of great things in there. I mean, having been to Kiev, we adopted our 3 kids from Ukraine.
Right.
And spent time in Kiev, and we went to the Olympic Training Center, and here's this room, this building, and it was great. It was fantastic. But you walk into the training hall, and it's plywood on the ground with mixed match bumpers, and guys lifting freaking 400, all kinds of weight, and so. It's very impressive, and there's absolutely aspects of each sport that's great. I think what you said, and what I'm a little disappointed in, and still to this point, is that even 20 plus years, 30 plus years, 40 plus years later, there's still not a degree in strength and conditioning. There's still not a degree in to that level of sophistication and knowing the kind of impact that it can have and the money that's being thrown to athletes, anymore. And so it kind of leads my into a question of, how do we, as strength coaches and as in the sports industry, how do we, because right now everything's athlete driven. How do we motivate the athletes to want and allow to be researched? Because in a lot of respects, especially in the NFL, I had a hard time putting a heart rate monitor on a guy. I had a hard time putting, an HRV monitor or whatever, just from a simple standpoint that they could be used against them.
Yeah. I don't know that we can replicate what they did because of the
I'm talking anywhere in the world, yeah.
Yeah, because the one positive with communism is that they can get everybody to cooperate.
Yeah, no question. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we live in a very free society, and we're extreme, which I love, by the way. But because the athlete, and it's a valid point, and I never thought about it before, but the athlete's like, wait a minute, you're going to use this against me later on when we go to contract negotiations or when we go to recruiting for a scholarship. Yeah. And as you know, in this country, sports is a business.
Yeah.
And people at the collegiate level, it's a business. People don't realize this head coach, this is how he feeds his family.
Right.
And, for better or for worse, that's what he's there for. He's got to provide for his family. So he's looking out for himself to whatever degree, and the athlete is there. This is his livelihood, hopefully, that maybe, I'm cashing in the scholarship, but maybe I think maybe I can play at the next level.
Right.
And he's got to make decisions that are somewhat business-like, to be honest. I don't know what the answer is. That's a wonderful question because, there, everybody was on the same team.
Right.
We're all on the Soviet team, right? Here, to kind of quote one of those, I can't remember what movie it was, but the team of me. I'm here for me.
That's
you
right.
know what I mean?
That's right.
And we're not on the same team. Like your head coach and your player at the pro level parallel, and they also diverge.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah, we want to win a Super Bowl together, but I need to win this contract negotiation so I can get paid.
Yeah, no question.
You know what I mean?
There's always a player on the Super Bowl winning team that's not happy about their current
situation.
Oh,
absolutely. And now all of a sudden when they win a Super Bowl, I'm cashing in now.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Which I understand.
I think where we have a unique opportunity is because our university system is so strong and there's so many resources that's being allocated there. I think really focusing on creating a degree-seeking program in strength and conditioning specifically will lead to a lot of things because it'll lead to research. And there's opportunities within the university to if we're giving you a scholarship to come to the university here, then you're opening yourself up to being evaluated and tested and things along those lines. But it's definitely something that and I go into this all the time. This is a tangent, and I'll get off of it, but I talk about it on the show quite a bit about we haven't really defined how we're evaluated as strength coaches yet. And because of that, I think we will never get validated until there's a degree-seeking program in what we do.
Oh, absolutely. I one of the things that I should have mentioned earlier was that they issued pedagogical degrees. You were a coach, so what you did was you learned biomechanics, you learned physiology, you learned nutrition, you learned psychology, all as it related to, and you could specialize in a sport, right? You could be a coach of the throws,
right?
Whatever. And so with that being the case, you learned all the science as it related to your field and to your coaching, right? But you learn how to coach,
right?
Not learning methods to develop strength only, right? And what we're learning is a lot of methods to develop strength in a certain way, but are we learning how to improve the athlete at what he does? And I think that's the distinction. What we've done in the United States is we've kind of we've looked at things that were like peripheral, like we know that if an athlete's stronger, he's a better athlete, right? What they did was, what makes an athlete better?
Right.
And so what we do is do things that are kind of incidental. Yeah, a stronger athlete's a better athlete, but there's a limit to that because otherwise powerlifters would be able to dominate every sport. They're the strongest, but they're not the best athletes.
Right.
And if, as you know, being a strength coach, you and every team that you are involved with, the strongest guy on the team is rarely the best player.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
That's right.
And the best player, a lot of times, not even close.
Yeah, so it looked like Tarzan played like Jane.
Exactly. Yeah. So you've got these deals where we've looked at incidental things like, well, we know that this is this, this makes a better athlete. So over here, let's just focus on that. And I think the problem has been that we focus on a lot of peripheral things and not always kept the focus on what makes this guy play his sport better. Because if you look at a Peyton Manning or Tom Brady, not that impressive athletically. In the weight room, they're not impressive at all.
Right.
Until you put on the field.
Right.
Then all of a sudden, they're impressive, right? And Jerry Rice could be a great example. The guy wasn't the greatest athlete in the world.
Yeah, Barry Sanders and Jerry Rice.
Barry Sanders.
Yeah,
Michael Irvin wasn't that amazing as an athlete, So very rarely is the guy on your team who's the best athlete, the best player too. That's also, the best athlete in terms of combine numbers. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think one of the things about, and this is where kind of a lot of my just rabbit holes, where I get off on rabbit holes and try to, really, kind of research things, not knowing if it really affect anything, but, in the recruitment process, in the development, recruitment versus development, there's a genetic ceiling. I don't think there's anybody that would disagree with that for an athlete. I don't think any of our athletes have met their genetic ceiling,
Right.
On any team in any sport,
Right. You're right.
But at the same time, the selection process, and I think what going back and looking through some of the old Russian literature and Chinese literature and things along those lines, I mean, they were very selective in who was in the program and who wasn't. I think in our recruiting processes, I think there's opportunities there to be a little bit more selective. Not just from a physiological standpoint, because we're not going to be able to draw blood and we're not being able to do, muscle biopsy or anything like that. But there's opportunities from an IQ and personality and things along those lines that we can be doing. Talk a little bit about just kind of recruitment versus development.
Okay, so what I always say is, because I'll hear people tell me a lot that this program, does great development of their athletes, or that program does. They've got a great program. And what I always say is, here's how you know what that school really believes in. Where do they spend their money?
Right.
So if the money's being spent on, recruiting, if that's where the money's going, then that's what they believe in.
Right.
Right. If very little money's being spent on development, that tells us. Getting a little sun here. I'm going to cover this up real quick.
Oh, you're fine.
So we know then that if that's the case, then they don't really believe in development as much, because they'd be putting their money over there, right? They'd be putting the resources behind it. And I believe that what the school ultimately really believes is we just got to recruit talent.
Yeah.
And the NFL believes we got to buy it, right? I think, though, as a strength coach like yourself, you want to be able to you're competitive, right? So you want to win, but you also want to do a better job than the strength coach at another school. You want to be, you want to run, you want to be developing talent faster than the other guy is,
right,
at a higher rate, a marginal improvement. I think that if we really put the money, not necessarily even the money, it's the focus on developing the athlete, because there's a lot of information already out there. We don't need to do a lot of research. Here's one of the things that people ask me all the time. They're like, I need to, I'm looking for new research and new stuff. I'm like, look, you don't even understand what's already out there.
Right.
What the race is, in my opinion, is to grasp what's already been done.
Sure.
Because to think that I understand the mind of Dr. Bondarchuk, for example, that's nonsense. He's so far ahead of everybody else, it's not even funny. What I got to do is understand what he already knows.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So my opinion is this, and we've done a little bit of an example of this, Ron, at Michigan Tech. I've been helping them with their program, their basketball football program, and they've been improving. They've had the highest ranking they've ever had was this year at 11 in the country. They've never been ranked that high ever. They've been ranked for 2 or 3 seasons running the highest they've ever been ranked in consecutive seasons. Still got improvement to make, but it's coming. And that's helped recruiting, which is interesting. There's a symbiosis there.
Right.
If you're developing the athletes, you start winning more, you get better recruiting. You know what I mean?
That's right.
So that's the way I look at it, is that we got to start grasping what's already there.
Right.
And start focusing our attention on what does it take to make this athlete play better, not necessarily perform better in the weight room not necessarily to look amazing at a combine, but to play better. There's other smaller things there. Like if you look at a guy, they said, this guy can just cover people. Is that his 40 time as a defensive back? No. The guy can change directions like nobody's business.
Right.
How do we do that, for example? How do we do that? What about a quarterback who can make certain throws from different positions? What is that? Well, that may be an issue of special strength development, because it's not a matter of how much he can bench press or squat. It's what velocity can he put on the ball? What's involved in that?
Right.
How do we figure that out? You know what I mean? And so, or make him accurate. How do we look at his technique maybe and make him a more accurate thrower? So I think that the problem is, and I think this is the fault of. I'm not really sure exactly where the fault lies. But a lot of strength coaches are getting evaluated on, are people getting hurt, number one. And number two, are we break? And I hear this a lot. The head coach wants records broken in the weight room. They need to be strong, always stronger. Bench more, squat more, deadlift more. And I think it's unfair to the strength coach, because his job's on the line. He's got to perform, right? And so a lot of times I think the strength coach can't really do help with the development as much as he can, because he has a pressure to perform, in the strength movements. Like that's all the head coach cares about, right? Or they use the strength and conditioning coach as kind of like an enforcer.
Sure.
He's used as punishment sometimes too.
Right.
So I think that all of the above, those are things I think that if they change, then you would be allowed to focus on getting these guys. Let's take the talent that we get and upgrade it. So every year, you know what I mean? Every year, then you could say, okay, freshman year, we want this much improvement, this much sophomore. By the time he's a senior, we wanted to have improved what we got. And I look at the way that I relate it is value-added process, right? You're a value-added process. They give you extra commodity, and you improve it. You improve the value of it. And that's what every company strives for. It's a value-added process.
Right.
And so I think that's really what the strength coach's job is to add value.
No question. I could agree with you.
But I don't think he's allowed to in a lot of ways. I don't think it's all fair to the strength coach either.
Yeah, well, I think what you touched on is the number of hats that a strength coach is wearing anymore. That wasn't being worn by one person in some of those countries we talked about. That's been multiple people. That's a sports psychologist. That's a nutritionist. That's a strength coach. That's a speed coach. That's we got to continue to build out that model, and that creates more opportunities and jobs and strength. All those types of things. So the opportunity there. One last thing I want to kind of talk about before we kind of get you out of here is just kind of level of adaptability. We talked about it a little bit earlier. About genetics and reaching the genetic ceiling and things along those lines. But, there's definitely, having been, almost in all the different aspects of sport now, there's opportunities for us to train people harder. Our athletes can adapt to what they're coming to. Now, that doesn't mean it's just like I think I read or heard you say at one time where it's like medicine. You don't want to give too little because it's not effective, but you don't want to give too much because it can kill you. What about, just kind of where we're at as a profession, maybe as a country, in terms of level of adaptability?
Yeah. So this is an interesting question that comes up a lot, Ron. And the way I look at it is this, and I'm echoing what, a lot of the authors, that I publish, I'm echoing. What you got to do is, number one, you got to find what the right medicine is for the intended outcome, right? So if you have an infection, they got to figure out which antibiotic they think is going to be the one that'll fix that, right? And it's experimentation to whatever degree. Secondly, dosage. How much? Too much could really do a lot of damage. Too little, not move the needle. Right. So the way I look at it is this. when you get an athlete who's 18 years old or 22, for example, I still think they're very plastic. They have a lot of adaptability. I think that we've underestimated the plasticity because, and I'll give you a couple of different anecdotes from the authors too that'll kind of give more scope to this. One thing is, my friend and future author, we're working on a book with Hank Krijnhoff, who's a great sprint coach from the Netherlands. He's always said, look, you need to use the minimal effective dose.
Right.
Find out what it is, the one that gets things going. And I've always said, with athletes is, how do you know you're not doing too much if you've never done too little? Because how do you know what moves the needle if you've never gone down to underneath what moved it?
Sure.
Right? And you'll get shocked sometimes that the dose can sometimes move the needle really fine. Right. The athlete's way more plastic than you thought. Here's what's happened. This is what's interesting. Dr. Bondarchuk, I don't know, we were talking, this is a number of years ago, and he said, coaches who use too much volume and too much intensity, he said, not only is it not effective because the athlete is so plastic, he starts to shut down because it's too much. He said, secondly, you've ruined him for the future because you can never come back to that volume and intensity level and get to do anything because the body's already built up a defense against it, right? Exactly. So you didn't get any good results now, and now you've ruined it for the future too.
Right.
So what I've looked at is, let's go down. Let's find out what the floor is and we have to experiment a little bit. Let's go to the floor of what gets it done, and then we'll go from there. So, and I've seen this. I was just talking with Brian Mann over at University of Missouri the other day, and he started tinkering around with Dr. Yessis' 1x20 program, which is 1 set, 20 repetitions. And a lot of people say, "Oh, there's no way you can develop strength with that." But there's been tons of studies that say, "Yes, you can." Right. And I don't need a study. I do it all the time, so I know it works, right? Yeah. And Michael Rennie, if you want for people who want the research, Michael Rennie, I think it is in the UK. I can't remember the university. Has done a number of studies on it and said it's just as effective. But what's interesting is he started tinkering with it, and he got a hold of me the other day. He's like, "Wow," he said, "I can't believe the result." He said, "I would have never thought," right? And we've seen this at Michigan Tech University. Here's what's interesting. We've used a minimal effective dose at different times where we use a 1x20, and we'll use other ones that are lower levels of intensity. Never, ever having used more than 2 sets of anything at Michigan Tech. They've had 0 non-contact injuries for 2 years straight.
Wow.
And to my understanding, that's almost unheard of. Yeah. At the same time, we compared notes with friends of ours at another major D1 university and found out Matt's kids at Tech were actually stronger than, and this is at a Big Ten school. I don't want to necessarily mention the school, but it was a Big Ten school. We found out that the athletes at Michigan Tech were actually stronger and by using lower intensity means. So I think what's the problem that you run into is that, especially in football, but in sports in general, the training has become a reflection of cultural beliefs.
Sure.
Push. We're Americans. We got to do everything over the top. We can't ever do anything normal, right? And the problem is there's laws of biology that don't change for us because of what we believe, sure, or the cultural things that we have in place. So I think that what you have to do is you have to find, what does it take to get the athlete to improve? What's the smallest dose? Because later on, we're going to have to use a bigger dose. So why use it now?
Right.
When, you know what I mean? Why should all your, empty the chamber? Let's leave some bullets in there for later. And I think that's one of the bigger keys is trying to find out, what does it take to elicit the response that we want? Whether it be in speed, strength, change of directions, agility, all these different things. What does it take to get it to elicit this response we need at a minimal level so that we can gradually take it up and keep eliciting a response? I think that if I was to give any coach advice, especially at the beginning, is find out what that is.
Right.
And put away your cultural beliefs. All that stuff, put it away. This is science.
Yeah.
You can't take cultural beliefs into any other science. So you shouldn't be able to take it into this one either. Go into it and say, well, let's find out. Let's be objective. Let's find out what works.
Yeah.
On the low dose level.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that's the case. Is that's what you see a lot of times, especially with professional organizations, is it goes back to producing on the field, not producing for you have numbers on the weight room wall. It's what is the minimum dose? These athletes respond to various different stimuluses at various different levels. Let's find what that is. And
Yeah, you gotta find.
you know,
Yeah, and it's experimentation, by the way.
no question.
You know,
I think it's
Dr.
timing.
says that all the time. He's like, I don't know what we're going to do yet. I got to find out.
Right.
We're going to experiment.
Right. And that's what's great about being evaluated off wins and losses as opposed to numbers necessarily, you know. But
yeah, I mean, the correlation is not, you know, proportional, you know,
right.
but you know, weight room or combine stuff. It's not proportional necessarily to success on the field. And we always got to remember, and this is what I tell coaches, and it's kind of become something that we've used as a tagline. Instead of scores like an FMS score, HRV score, we use the CTC score, the cut the check score. The only thing that matters is, did it get the athlete a scholarship, a paycheck, or a medal? And if they don't get the check cut, it doesn't matter. Who cares? Because they don't give checks for weight room records.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
They get checks for performing on the field.
That's awesome.
And so I think that helps you always keep your focus.
Yeah, I agree with you.
You know, I have a young baseball player that I work with here, and he's trying to get into Major League Baseball, and he's coming along, and he'll say, hey, I can do this better now, that better now, all these different measurables, right? And I said, that's great. I said, but the only one that I care about is how many zeros are behind your check.
Right.
That's the only measurement. There's one number I'm concerned with, the one that's on the check.
Yeah.
The rest of them, I don't care about.
Right.
I like them. You know, as you know, you like them. You like to see your guy run fast or 40 fast, right? You want to see him jump higher. All these things they're like economic indicators. They give you an idea about stuff, but they don't tell you the whole picture.
No, I agree.
Right? So, you know what I mean? So I look at it from that point of view. I said the numbers that matter are the ones that are on that check they give you. Those are the numbers that I care about. And I think if you keep that focus, it allows you to not get sidetracked too much.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%, man. Well, you're doing some really cool things there with the Ultimate Athlete Concepts. You know, you've got some things in the works. Talk a little bit about what you got coming down the pipe.
Yeah. Okay. So I've been thinking for a long time that I wanted to be able to find a better way to connect coaches with scientists, right? And maybe with other coaches who are doing something differently than what they're doing. And so what we've done is we're rolling out a new site that is out this week where we're going to we have a bunch of new features. So one is we're going to have video interviews with a lot of my authors and other higher level coaches answering a lot of questions. We're also going to have a Q&A section where our readers can ask questions of the scientists, our authors. You know, like, I don't understand this in your book. Can you answer that for me?
Right.
You know, and this is unprecedented because you got to remember, most of my authors are not native English speakers, so this is kind of a monumental text.
Yeah.
You know, they don't all speak English great, or they don't speak it at all. You know, in a comprehensible way. So what we're trying to do is bridge this gap, right?
Sure.
So you can ask questions of something you didn't understand. So what we're going to do is two things. You can submit questions. And then I'm going to take some groups of them, and I'm actually going to do a video interview with the author and go through the questions. And we're going to answer them right there. So that way you can say, hey, there's my question, you know, and I got it answered, right?
Yeah.
We're also going to have an article section, and we've already started. Vladimir Isurin is kicked it off for us. He has a new article on there on the site that we're posting right now as the site's getting ready, and a video interview as well. And then we're also going to have a forum where coaches can talk to each other about stuff. It's like, hey, I've been trying this. What do you think? I haven't seen a real universal place now where coaches exchange ideas on a high level, you know, on a good scientific level, in the way that we're hoping to do this. So we'll also have that in place. We'll also have a blog and really kind of looking for ways that coaches can interact with each other and also interact with the scientists. Because I think the biggest thing that I found is the biggest problem that I see with my own business is that people will call me and they'll say, I read the book, and they don't understand it well enough to implement it. And one thing that people have to remember is that these guys only wrote for the high-level athlete.
Right.
So you have to be able to understand that it's not written for your athlete.
Right.
If you're a college expected conditioning coach, he's not high-level yet. So what you do have to do is be able to understand, okay, conceptually, how do I make that adapt to my situation?
Right.
Because I don't have a athlete. I have a 19-year-old here who's genetically gifted but not high level in terms of trainers.
Yeah. No, I couldn't. Yeah.
How do I do that?
That's an awesome resource.
You know what I mean? Because a lot of people confuse genetically gifted with high level, and they're not the same thing.
No doubt.
And so really what I want to do, Ron, is I want to bridge that gap, and so you get something out of that book that you go back and take and you actually use.
Yeah.
Not that you just talk about with your friends. Oh, it's a great concept, whatever. But then when you actually go to the workout, it looks like it did the day before. Right. I want you to be able to take something back and go, hey, I got an idea about how we can do this differently and get better results. That's what I'm really hoping to do, because I'm not a theoretical guy myself. All I understand is what are we going to do to make the athlete better. I don't understand the deep theory. It's over my head. So I don't want to leave my customer with a book who he likes in theory, but he can't use in practice. I want him to be able to use the material in practice. So that's our main objective here going forward with our site.
Well, that's one of the best things about doing this show is early on it was, of course, you reach out to your buddies that are in the strength industry that are doing the same job you're doing, and you're going to always pick up things from time to time. But what I've really found that I've learned the most is when I've gotten outside of my box and reached and reached out to those those scientists and those authors and those what's the word I'm looking for? Just thought innovators. I mean, just innovators of concepts, and really getting into kind of like why are you doing what you're doing, and what I found more often than not, like exactly what you said, is it sparked something that I've been able to take and use in my own little way, and so I appreciate you putting that resource out. We finished up the show. I want to get you out of here with some quick, just tidbits here. What's the best piece of coaching advice you've ever received?
I think it kind of goes back to what we just mentioned earlier. Dr. Yessis said, look, if it doesn't result in this guy being a better athlete, not athlete, but better a participant in his sport, it doesn't matter. Mm. The guy came to you to be a better basketball player, football player, not athlete.
Right.
Yes, they're going to be a better athlete, but it's got to relate onto the sport. And if you don't have that, you wasted your time.
No, I agree. What about we're going to link up all the books that you guys got and your website and everything, but give us a book, app, and website recommendation.
Okay. Book, I would say one that I don't publish is Build a Better Athlete from Dr. Michael Yessis. I think that's one of the books where you can actually take something out of the book and go apply it and use it and get a good result with it. It's very foolproof in that way. It's easy to understand. It's got stuff that you can take away right then. And I know that it'll work because I've used it over and over and over again. The material from that. So I definitely think his book might be the best one out there in that regard. Especially books that I don't publish. App, that's an interesting question because I'm a technological moron, to be honest with you. That's just the plain cold truth. But I think that the more that I've been talking with Brian, man, I think maybe the GymAware app or one of the ones in that group might be one of the ones that really might be extremely useful for people. You know what I mean? Where we can start looking at things from a different point of view, because I think once the athlete gets to a certain strength level, he doesn't need to be any stronger. Now he needs to be able to move that load faster. And I think that might be the place where, you can really add a dimension to what you're doing.
Sure. What about a website?
Website. Okay, yeah. Outside of ours, if you don't mind, I'll give you two. Yeah. Central Virginia's website. I think the Central Virginia seminar, Jay does a phenomenal job there. Great information, and he's working hard putting content out. He's interviewing a lot of people, lots of new articles. I highly recommend that. And then obviously my mentor, DrYessis.com. He's done tons of different segments there where he does YouTube clips lecturing on different ideas and concepts. And he's written a lot of articles in that way. All stuff that's very useful for what you do, not just stuff to talk about, but something that you can actually take home and use.
Well, that's awesome, man. Well, hey, buddy, as somebody that produces content, that tries to put stuff out there for everybody to consume, I know how much work goes into it, man. And for you having to be an innovator and to realize that there was a gap of this knowledge that existed that wasn't really being consumed by the masses, to go out and take the initiative to do that, man. I can't thank you enough. I've benefited. I've read a handful of the books. Looking forward to reading more, and I just appreciate what you've done for the profession, man.
Well, I tell you what, I appreciate what you're doing for the profession, because people don't realize that, when you do something that's a little bit different, it's not welcomed all the time by everybody.
That's true.
There's a lot of people who just like the status quo. And I appreciate guys like you and guys like Jay who have the courage to step outside of your comfort zone a little bit, or outside of what convention is, and say, hey, let's see what they're doing. Let's look at that. I appreciate it, because it really, a lot of people don't realize this. A lot of people are leery of something that would seem a little bit different, because they're like, I don't want to put myself out there.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So to be honest with you, what we're doing doesn't happen without people like you. So I appreciate you absolutely just as much, because if that doesn't happen, there's a lot of people who listen to your show and really appreciate what you do, who might not otherwise ever come in contact with what I do, or even look at it seriously, because they're like, I don't know. But when you're putting your validation on it and saying, hey, I think this is something you guys should look at, it's huge for me. No. It really is, and I really sincerely appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, sir.
That's it for this episode of Iron Game Chalk Talk. Thanks to this week's guest as well as our sponsors for bringing this episode to you for free. Make sure to check out ronmckeefery.com, where you can join our mailing list, find the show notes, including all the links and resources mentioned, and information about Coach McKeefery's other products. While you are there, please join Coach McKeefery in the comments section thanking our guest for sharing. If you haven't subscribed to Iron Game Chalk Talk on YouTube or iTunes yet, make sure to do so. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome. Coach McKeefery can be found on Twitter at @RMcKeefery, on Facebook and YouTube at /Ron.McKeefery. That's it for this week. Be sure to check back next week for another great episode of Iron Game Chalk Talk.